Well, I've just been running this Toshiba TV and there's still a bit of smoke. Just trying to get the thing running, see if it had any colour, and something made a funny noise and we got a bit of smoke coming out the back. Smells a little bit like electrolytic capacitor. So it's been a while since I've had a TV do anything exciting like that, but I heard something, almost sounded like the top of a capacitor exploded and hit something in there. So we might have one that's spewed its guts out and blown its top off. Always a risk with old TVs. Of course, this TV's sold as working and it's pretty poor condition. I guess if your coil has a raster come up working, it was hard to get the vertical hold locked in, the colours out, focus is out, tuners are dicky, most of the controls need a clean. And then to add insult to injury, something went pop in there, and it weighs like 35 kilos or something for a, it is actually an 18-inch television, but in a plastic case. I'm pretty sure these are a fairly old chassis, so I was surprised to see it in a plastic case, but didn't really see many Toshiba TVs around. To be fair, the older ones were not particularly good. They were a good brand later on, but their early TVs were pretty iffy, and I think some of the, I think they were some sort of Korean-made Princess CT1, CT2s, something like that, were copied off the Toshiba, and they were a really cheapo, horrible TV. But the Toshibas used to have a lot of dry joint issues. I think they had plated through holes in their, on their circuit boards, which was pretty insane in a TV. And the soldering was terrible on them. But you didn't see many of them, but they did get better. Oh, look at the smoke pouring out of the thing. Ah, I think we've got a reefer. Yeah, it's a reefer cap. That's what hit. I heard something go sort of flying in there. Well, I wouldn't have expected a reefer in a Toshiba, but even they use the silly things. Yeah, there's one over near the power transformer here. Still don't know how that weighs so much. I mean, it's got a half decent transformer in it, but it feels awfully heavy for what it is. For a plastic case TV, at least it's not the line output transformer. But there you go. Even in the middle of summer, that reefer decided to blow its guts out. I didn't think it smelled quite like an electrolytic, but it's the wonderful reefer cap exploding. I think I'll have to take that last screw out of the power thing. I guess for a bit of fun we could maybe slide it out and see if how much smoke comes out of it by plugging it in again. But I might have to put some safety glasses on if it's going to go flinging bits everywhere. So yeah, you don't get the delights of having smoke coming out of these things too often. I really need to set it face down, but I don't have any carpet on this bench. Oops, chassis trying to go sideways there. Let's see if we can get the other screw out of this transformer chassis thing. Hopefully I'm just hanging on to it in case it wants to drop out. It's slotted in pretty well, I think, but the chassis is trying to escape already. This definitely not one of the early Toshiba chassis, thank God. But it's, I don't know when they went to these. Plastic cabinets were normally more around the 80s. So it's basically on the board there. Now that it's blown half its guts out, it probably won't go flinging too much bits of this epoxy stuff everywhere anymore, but I don't know if I can really get that out where the camera can see it better. Oh, it's probably in shot just. Oh, I've got full face protection, so that'll do. Let's see, I'm going to move away a bit and get a more convenient PowerPoint so I can switch it off quickly. And the set sounds like it's running. Maybe that was it. That's a bit disappointing. I think Mr. Reefer's done his little explosion and that's it. I think we let all the smoke out the first time. Never when you're on camera, unfortunately. So it looks like I'll have to Oh, I can just remove it and throw it away, it'll be a good start. Would have been good to catch one of them on film. It was a shame I didn't take the back off at first and start filming, but never going to be that lucky, I guess. Yeah, it's blown part of the windings of the foil in it look to have exploded a bit. That's the fuse. What's this other thing? Oh, there's a wire link hidden in there. So reefers are probably the most exciting thing you'll find in most electronics as far as sparks and explosions. Occasionally a line output transformer will do a pretty good job, and the odd exploding electrolytic or overheating resistor or something, but I think these reefers did one of the best jobs of it. So yeah, it's exploded a bit of black burnt foil there, blown part of the foil out. I guess the foil expanded or something and finally popped that bit of epoxy off. They just basically a wrapped up foil capacitor with the leads, and then they dip it in epoxy. I also thought they were a European brand or something, but which I think they might be. So what they're doing in a Toshiba, I don't know. Maybe because they met the right safety requirements for Europe or Australia or somewhere. It's probably something like that. Ironically, that a reefer meets safety standards. But that'd be typical of the EU or something, to have regulations that make you buy their stuff and then it's a piece of junk. But it's got to be something like that, because why else would the Japanese put a crappy cap like that in their equipment? Doesn't make any sense. But at least we've got to look inside this thing now. But yeah, fairly old chassis. I don't know what this chassis is called. Have we got anything? Chassis number... Let me get the dust off some of this stuff. It's a C1821, by the way, model number. Made in Japan. Chassis number TAP846B. Serial number there. This has only got one plug-in card with a chroma chip. Naturally using a Toshiba chip. That's one thing, a lot of Toshiba chips were used in things. But their actual earlier TVs were not the greatest by any means. And of course Toshiba tubes. Excellent tube normally. The good old black stripe. This is a 470 HAB22. Made by Toshiba Japan. Usual warning labels and stuff. And yeah, not much else to say. Well, this has got a UHF tuner in it. More than a lot of these old sets had. Interesting tube socket there. Not your average, almost looks like Bakelite, but I think it's just dark brown plastic. It's fairly early, so I'd say this would be late 70s, I would think. Like I say, not many TVs in a plastic cabinet above 14 inches or so, 16 maybe at that point. But the fake wood grain would suggest it's an old one for sure. And yeah, nothing really exciting about that chassis. What have I got? 2SD819 horizontal output. So I think that's the later one with the damper diode built in. 2SD657 regulator, made by Toshiba. I think the other one was too. Yep, both Toshiba transistors. So they made the tube, the transistors, colour IC. I think we've got a couple of other chips in here. Yeah, how does this chassis come out? That should just slide out, surely. Well, it's not going to be that simple. One side slides out. Yeah, they're both, it looks like metal wedges. Oh, there's actually a screw under there, you're kidding me. Okay, the chassis is screwed in on one side. I can see a couple of small ICs, 16 pinners or whatever, on sitting on quite high IC sockets. But what this TV needs, now that I know it's nothing major blown up in there, is I need a signal back on it. Let's see if we can tweak this thing up and get a decent picture on it. And then it needs all the pots and tuner cleaning, I'd say. So there we have it. Bit of a purple picture to say the least. And that's right, I still had the problem, I don't think I had any colour on this, but at the moment, turn that volume down. That ain't volume, is it? That's a dicky pot of something, contrast. That's the brightness is down underneath. Let's get some more in there. Okay, so this tube's pretty flary if I turn the green up, so you can see, if you look on the white, the green basically flares right out. When they say tubes flare, that's what it looks like. There's a bit of red flare in there too. That's the blue by the look of it, if I turn that down a bit. What is that control, I wonder? Screen control or something. Oh yeah, that is the actual screen. So yeah, this tube is very unhappy. Turn up the sub brightness and we're getting a similar thing. Tube just starts flaring out and I cannot get the balance, colour balance right really. Yeah, we've got blue. I don't think we've got much red there is the problem. Can't get the low lights right. Highlights aren't exactly beautiful either. So yeah, tube's pretty unhappy. And I've still got to see if I can get any colour out of this thing, but it doesn't seem to tune in onto a colour signal at all. Somewhere there we should be getting colour coming up. So I suspect there's a fault in the colour section as well. Better check the pattern generator is actually working on something else, I guess, because that would be embarrassing if that was not putting out a colour signal for some reason. And yeah, very hard to get that focused fully, it's pretty blurry. So very low tube. So perfect colour signal coming out of the pattern generator. Always pays to check these things. So I suspect that chroma board, maybe the crystal's gone or something. I was sent an old service manual or collection, one of those JR or whatever they are, books of old circuits from someone on Facebook, and it actually has a circuit for this TV, though it's only got the larger versions of it. But it looks like there's two versions of the chassis and the model numbers, and they just change with the size of the screen and whether they're rotary tuner or varactor tuner. But at least I've got a circuit if I need it. I'm not sure I can actually work on this colour board in the TV. What sort of chip has it got? TA7193. I doubt I've got another one of them anywhere. But you never know. And possibly the colour crystal could be faulty. It used to happen occasionally. Okay, I just changed the crystal in it since I can't really measure anything on this board with it running. And they're meant to have like an extension lead sort of set so you can work on the board off the main chassis there. But anyway, I swapped that over, resoldered a few joints on the chip, and we seem to have colour back. And then I put the old crystal back in, still got colour, so maybe it was just a dry joint there. Maybe it's something to do with the controls, but you can see when we turn this, I think we're at fairly much maximum contrast and brightness anyway. But again, in a flary tube, you're starting to see like that red and the green and stuff spreading out past the normal colour bar position, which is pretty much what they do. So the red must be pretty weak in this, as well as the green. The blue seems to be alright, that's not flaring out. The other thing I noticed, the volume control's pretty dicky. And that's the contrast control. Again, a lot of flickering when I touch that. I had a feeling the tuners weren't the best, but it doesn't seem too bad. Even when I turned the automatic fine tuning on and off, it was playing up on the the contrast control, but it seems a little bit better now. Not as flickery as it was. And that's the colour, and what was the other one? Brightness. So that's a little flickery when we do that. But at least it's going again. And the vertical hold was very touchy when I first did it, but it seems to be quite reasonable now. But maybe that pot needs a clean as well. So besides that blown up reefer cap and maybe a couple of dry joints in the colour section, plus a few adjustments, it does run. Not a great tube in it, but I think other than that I'll just give it a clean, a few potentiometers. Not sure the tuners even really need a clean. It's not too bad, but colour's a little slow to lock in there, so maybe there's still something iffy in the colour section somewhere. That tuner's actually pretty good. I haven't tried the UHF one. I think I'll just clean the dust out of this thing and give it a clean up on the outside, and that'll do. She's a bit of a display TV, but not much else. I say fairly rare. These are actually, according to that manual, made about 1979, 1980, so certainly an early one for a plastic case. And it's quite heavy for what it is. I guess with all that power transformer and a reasonable chassis in it, and maybe the tube's a bit heavier than usual. I don't think it'll be much different to the later tubes. And I guess the extra metal brackets with like twin rotary tuners and stuff, you forget that those actually weigh a bit themselves. There's probably half a kilo or something just in that, maybe more. And yeah, the transformer might be a couple more kilos, and the chassis frame's reasonably heavy in this probably. So it all adds up over time. And we've got a metal bracket on the back of the top of the cabinet above the tube to hold the thing sturdy there, I think, steady, and stop it flexing the old plastic case. So all those things make quite a bit of difference to what you're used to with a plastic TV, but it seems to be a pretty solid set. I mean, there's a bit of RF interference there, not surprising, coming from the pattern generator, and it's going via a longer lead, which probably doesn't help. So the joiner and that's probably a little iffy. But yeah, I'll go over and we'll give this a quick clean of the controls. Looks like I can probably do most of them in situ, which is even better. Yeah, it looks pretty simple, and that should get it going. Well, this TV looks a heap better with the dust out of it. It's not perfectly clean, but at least it hasn't got all that fluffy stuff hanging off everything. So I can actually get there's two potentiometers down the bottom here. Yeah, I think that was the colour, and wasn't contrast, brightness it must have been. So I think I can just squirt. They've got the terminals pointing up, so I should be able to just squirt contact cleaner. If I can get the nozzle in the right spot, into there, and just give them a quick run. And then we've got a switch pot up here for with the volume. Again pointing upwards, so it's probably no wonder they're a bit dirty. It's good for cleaning them, but it's not good for collecting dust in the first place. And we've got the AFT and contrast, again pointing upwards. So you've got an open hole near the contacts there, which is just a place for dust to fall into. Oh, and the other one I was going to do is the vertical hold. Up near the antenna socket there. Switch that on and see what happens. Well, we don't have any vertical hold. Not sure that's any better. We've got no colour again. Hopefully that's just because I've turned the control down. Yeah. Brightness up. Yeah, no flickers in anything so far. And volume control. Perfect. So it's probably just a bit of dust and stuff for falling in there. So it looks like we've got a working TV though with a very soft tube in it. Doesn't look too bad on the colour bars. And this is the chassis in this thing. So around 1980 they started looking more like this. It's just got the one little plug-in upright board for the colour, right next to the PTC, which is not the best design because that runs hot, the degousing thermistor there, but they have only got a few resistors on the board and then this connector above it, so didn't do a bad job. I did check the capacitors on that board, they're all fine. Like new basically. A lot of these chassis, all the original caps are still good in them. You really didn't see a lot of these. Very reliable TV normally. Very similar to the layout of like the AWA Q chassis around that time. And a few other things like that. So they've all, most of the Japanese sets were going down to this kind of single flat chassis design. A lot less wiring for them to do. This one still has the separate controls. They did have the budget model with the rotary tuners and the rest, so likely the chassis that came out with the Varactor tuners would have had a completely separate board somewhere. Much like the AWAs of that era, they'd have a separate board with the Varactor tuner, probably over near the speaker there somewhere in the front panel, in behind the sort of push button panel, but it'd basically be the same main chassis, and those things are just plug in. Might have had a couple of modifications for different connectors, because you've got to run your 30 volts to your Varactor tuner. You don't need that in a non-Varactor model. That may have been, sometimes I think they had a separate transformer or separate winding on the power transformer, and that'd run things like that. That'll all be on the separate board, so they could still use exactly the same tuner here and then just run an IF straight into this one like they do with the rotary tuners. So yeah, getting quite compact at this stage, a lot better in many ways to work on, and reliability wise than the earlier sets from the 70s, which were a lot of separate boards normally, or plug-in boards, and still a lot more circuitry in them. This is starting to get like one big colour chip in it. Still only 16-pin chips for the other ones. There's only a couple of other chips in there, I think. One around the IF maybe, and one probably for the sync and horizontal vertical drive stuff. So you're starting to get to the point where there's, chips are doing all the low signal stuff, and it's just the vertical output transistors that still got in it, horizontal output transistor, which all of them have still in the old TO3 case, also a regulator, and a great big, there's a pair of, on this end heatsink here, I better not poke that because it's on at the moment, but two great big, I guess 20 watt or something resistors. Does it say 25H 91 ohms? So it's probably a 25 watt resistor, or two of them. And the other one's 82 ohms, I think, and that one's 91. So yeah, there's some sort of series regulator set up there with a 2SD 657, because it's not even an 8 series. And it says power regulator on the heatsink underneath that, Q something 801 or something. Still a bit of dust there I didn't get. So they're still a little crude. No switch mode power supplies in most of these, just a transformer. And yeah, series regulator, often with a couple of those big resistors to drop a bit of voltage or something. And so that was a bit of a waste of power and heat, but not too bad compared to some of the earlier sets that had a lot more than that. Really not many other high wattage resistors in here. There's a few on the main board, but not like some of the older sets that are full of 5 and 10 watt resistors everywhere, including in things like pin cushion and dynamic convergence, because they were in delta gun tubes, not inline tubes, so there's a lot more stuff in those things. But generally quite a neat little TV, and still running pretty well as far as the electronics go since 1981. So yeah, it's a good 40 something years old now, or was it 1979-80 that manual came out that has this chassis in it. So it would have been built around that time, I guess. Let's say a 1980 TV. I don't think there's a date anywhere. So it's done pretty well to have such reliable electronics. Soldering all still looks pretty good. There were a couple of pins on that colour chip weren't perfect, but I'm not sure whether there was something funny going on there or whether I had a dry joint or what, but I couldn't seem to get colour out of it at the start. So, but it's all working now and seems to be stable. And yeah, everything else working fine in it. So just clean the pots, and it's basically, you know, if that wasn't such high hours, and it shows it is a high hour set because the tube's worn out, so it's done a lot of work. It'll still be a perfectly working TV, I think. I mean, you could almost get away with that picture, given what some people used to watch back in the day. It's pretty soft on the things like the crosshatch and stuff. I wouldn't want to watch it, but it did the job, I guess. Some people would put up with a lot worse than that, and worse colour balance. I can't get the colour balance perfect, the grayscale on it. So I'm a bit on the blue side, but it's not the end of the world. At least I've got it so the green isn't flaring all over everything. But yeah, just another nice 40 odd year old TV. And like a lot of these Japanese ones, still running really well. Ironically, the only other issue, of course, was this horrible reefer capacitor, which is made in Sweden supposedly. So the one European part they put in there, of course, decides to blow up. But you know, admittedly, it is 40 years old as well, so it hasn't done too bad. But these were known for blowing up for a long time ago as well. Not the most uncommon failure to get a lot of smoke out of things was these reefer caps with their epoxy coating. Supposedly moisture gets in there. I don't know if that is really the case through the cracks, or whether it's just a bad design and the insulation's breaking down or something. I think they used these in the Australian telephones, which ran on about 50 volts, and they're all cracked in them usually, and they don't seem to fail at that voltage. But you'd think, you know, even if enough moisture got in there, even at 50 volts would be enough to upset it. But I guess it's a fairly low current circuit. But certainly 240 volt, these things like to go bang. And yeah, like I say, I don't know why Toshiba ended up with one of these capacitors in it. The Japanese normally wouldn't touch these sort of parts because they're known to be unreliable. It's actually got quite a big bulge on the other side here. I can feel where it's cracked. The only crack in the epoxy there is because this inner foil is bulged up. This one really isn't cracked anywhere else, I don't think. Often they're cracked around the top. The only cracks in it are really where it's expanded. The foil inside has expanded because the insulation's broken down or something. And it does look like it's happened internal to the foil. Like, I'm not sure you'd get moisture down in there that easy. I've got in through the ends, I guess. I personally still suspect it's just bad insulation or something. For some reason, Europeans and electricity don't mix the best. You know, they can make some reasonable stuff, but for some reason, any Japanese TV you open up and you see a European, like a TDA chip or something in it, that's the first thing you go for, like the Gold Star PCO4 chassis. The only thing that really went wrong with them, besides a few caps in the power supply, was the colour chip, which was a Philips one. And I've opened up JVC videos, hi-fi videos, had no sound, and you see this TDA 4500 or whatever it was, sound decoder chip in there, and you're like, if it was a Japanese thing, you'd look at the big chip and go, well, that's not the problem. And when you see a European chip in there, you go, that is the problem. And the first one I got of those, I just swapped the chip in it because I had a second-hand chip lying around somewhere. I think I just thought, well, there's no point even getting the oscilloscope out, I'll just swap the European chip in it, and sure enough, that fixed the problem. So I ordered a new one for that. Gave them a quote and ordered a new one for it. They were happy to get it fixed. But it always seems to be the weak point is these sort of dodgy Euro parts that certainly German TVs and British TVs and stuff are a lot less reliable. Luckily we didn't get too many in Australia. Mostly got the Asian stuff, which was, even the Samsungs and Gold Stars when they started out, was still a lot better than some of the German stuff. The Philips weren't too bad, but they were usually at least easy to fix when they failed. Okay, I just actually turned this, had the pattern generator in the black and white mode, turned it back to colour, couldn't get the colour back on. I turned the TV off and back on, and it came back up again. Turned the pattern generator to black and white, and it stayed in black and white. So I actually tweaked this there's a lower pot on the colour board over the back side of it down the bottom there, so I just gave that a slight clockwise rotation, and it seems to be behaving itself now. I can turn the pattern generator on and off as far as colour goes, and it locks back in. It was a bit of a delay there before. It's still not instant, but it comes up pretty well immediately. So I think that adjustment might have just been slightly out. But sometimes you get something like that. Component values change over time, especially after 40 years, and the controls just need a little tweak to get them back in range. But yeah, it seems reliable now, but maybe there is still an intermittent issue where I'll turn it on in colour, in grayscale, and then try flicking on the colour, and it's coming up, so maybe it was just slightly out in the adjustment there. But anyway, thanks for watching.